Welcome to the enchanting world of the Never Cross a Witch Bitch podcast. Prepare to be captivated as we embark on a thrilling journey into the realm of spirituality with our remarkable team of a distinctive energy mixture. Leading the way is Mitch Garlington, a gifted gay male witch, touring stage medium, and psychic tarot card reader. With a background in the competitive corporate world and experience as a Cher impersonator, Mitch brings a fresh and unique perspective to our discussions. Next, we have Lucy Locke, a former fundamentalist Christian missionary turned sex shop manager turned professional dog groomer turned psychic medium, trance channeler, and tarot card reader. Her incredible transformation into the spiritual world is truly inspiring. And last, but certainly not least, we have Carly Batten, a second-generation practicing pagan, intuitive oracle card reader, and spiritual mother to many. Carly brings a grounded approach and simple understanding to the complexities of spiritual living. Together, we form an unstoppable podcast as we delve into all things spiritual and the journey of life. Our mission is crystal clear: to spread the message that spirit embraces all and that each of us is on a spiritual path, whether we realize it or not. So buckle up and get ready for an exhilarating adventure with the Never Cross a Witch Bitch podcast. Please note that all ideas discussed and presented in this podcast are the personal opinions of the individual podcasters and do not necessarily reflect the views of each other or the viewers. Hi, everyone.
Sorry.
Welcome to our, I guess this will be the 8th episode of Never Cross a Witch Bitch podcast. And
yes,
I want to say hi from Lucy, aka Verbal Diarrhea, and introduce Carly Batten, aka Whirlwind.
Hi.
And then we just have Mitch.
Yeah, we have Mitch here. If you guys have a witch's name that you think would suit Mitch, put your thoughts in the comments or on our personal Facebook page of Never Cross a Witch Bitch. We'd love to have you part of that page if you're not part of it. And also on our YouTube, we'd love it if you liked and subscribed to our YouTube channel. It would mean the world to us, and also our Spotify and Hubster channels too. So today we were discussing for quite a while what we were going to talk about. We went on many rabbit trails. So I'm thinking this might be a rabbit trail show. We'll see.
It's going to be a bumpy one.
Yeah. But we were going to talk about, first of all, shadow work. We're coming into the age of Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius in about a day and a half. And part of that in astrology is that some of our shadow sides are going to come up. And what is shadow work? What are our shadow sides? Well, we're going to discuss many different things. So thoughts, you guys?
Well, for me, shadow work is it's that mucky stuff that we all try and avoid. It's that stuff that we try to suppress down. But at some point, it's just got to come out and be processed, be understood. Sometimes we just have to hold space for it, don't we? And then really go into the thick of that and think, what is this? Why are you triggering me? Where are you coming from? And how do I heal from you? And I think it's just being open to have the experience and to not move it to one side or pretend it's not happening, to actually own it for what it is, whatever it might consist of or be. And we were talking about this the other day, weren't we, about like there's stuff from our pasts that still comes back and sort of tries to trip us up en route, and we almost have to catch it before it causes too much sort of damage and problem. So for me, shadow work is just owning the shitty side of being human, really, in a nutshell. I don't know how you deal and sort of digress it to be, but in a sort of roundabout way, that to me is what it is. What's your thoughts, Whirlwind?
I love it. What's your thoughts, Whirlwind? Well, in a whirlwind, a bit like that. Like we were talking, we were having that conversation, weren't we? It doesn't matter how far down your path, where just as you think you've sorted all your shit out, got all your ducks in a row, there's something that then crops up and you go, well, why is that cropped up? But actually, when you look at it, it's not necessarily something you've missed. It's just something that you've got to go back and work on. And I think also with doing your shadow work is owning those emotions. So realizing what that part of the shadow work creates it, brings up in you as your emotions. And they're not necessarily forgiving, because obviously sometimes there's stuff that happens that you don't want to forgive, but it's realizing the emotions, acknowledging what it is, and then releasing it and letting it go, because it no longer serves you at this moment in time where you are in your path. So it's always reoccurring. So as soon as you think you've got your shit sorted, that's the thing. I mean, it's like, we were saying about it has layers. It's like an onion, which I'm sorry, but always makes me think of Shrek. It's like onion, it's being an ogre. Ogres are like onions. They don't leave them out in the sun and they go all white and hairy. They have layers. And that's what it is. It's, you're gonna take a while to get down to, you might even not necessarily get to the core of your shadow work. And it can be the tiniest little thing. We were talking about trauma. Excuse me. It can be the tiniest little thing that niggles you, like a situation that you've taken on too much emotion from somebody else and you haven't let it go, to something that's a lot bigger. And it could be just general changing the way how you deal with crappy people every day in your life. That's a little bit of shadow work as well, not reacting, acknowledging the emotions and letting it go, because obviously there's a trigger in you that makes you go and put your hackles up. So there's lots of ways you can do it. There's daily shadow work, having a shower and a ritual and getting the shit and the crap down the drain, which is getting rid of your stuff and you're not carrying it with you. And there's more deeper stuff that you would have to address in other ways, or cutting ties as well. I mean, that's shadow work as well, isn't it? Cutting those red shoelaces that we all talk about and getting rid of them. So yeah, that's sort of shadow work in a nutshell for me, really, is and also being honest with yourself. That's really hard to do.
Yeah, definitely being honest. It's the number one thing, isn't it? What about you, verbal diarrhea? You've been quite quiet today so far.
Because I have a lot to say about shadow work. Sit down and buckle up. I love I love I know Whirlwind, I know Carly is not a fan of terminology, but I love the term shadow work. Shadow work to me is something that's so important to my life. When I discovered it, it scared me at first. But then when I really learned about it, and I've read some books on shadow work, they're very freeing. I'll put them down in the links below afterwards. But shadow work is it's not about becoming a better person. It's all about freedom and healing. And what shadow work is not denying those parts that we reject about ourselves. It's actually embracing those parts that we reject about ourselves and dousing them in absolute love. And actually integrating them into ourselves. Because some of the most rejected parts of ourselves are some of our biggest gifts. And that sounds really weird. So like, let's say, I'm going to go really deep here, and it might, a trigger warning for some of you out there. Let's say you're a victim or a survivor. I'd rather use the survivor of abuse or sexual abuse when you were younger. Now that's really hard to face in shadow work because there's a lot of shame attached. It's like the onion. There's layers and layers and layers. One layer is just admitting it happened in the first place. And actually acknowledging it happened. And some people, that takes years to come to even that one layer. And that is a huge layer, just the acknowledgement. Now, that story of that sexual abuse, you think that's like one of the worst parts of my life. But when it starts to heal, it actually can be used as light to shine and help others to admit to their healing journey, to admit to what happened to them in the past, to take away the shame of it. Can you see how it turns into like a gift?
Yeah, it goes into that rippling, doesn't it, that we talk about a lot.
Yeah. So when I do shadow work, first of all, I only do it if things come up in me that are negative or whatever. I will not necessarily do shadow work right then and there. Reason being is because I'm not in a good frame of mind at that moment in time. So I'm not going to be looking at it from a very high perspective. I'm going to be in my moment of feeling pretty shitty. But when I do maybe write it down, the feeling, or I do hold it there and say, okay, I'm going to visit you. And I don't do it in a threatening way, but it's like usually when stuff is purging up, it can feel really awful in the moment, but it's purging up to be looked at, to be released. But
Mm.
I only will look at it when I'm feeling good and in a good frame of mind. So for instance, last night, I was in a really good frame of mind, and I all of a sudden felt like, look at your anger. And I thought, okay. So I sat with my anger for a while, and I must say, anger in my life has gotten less and less and less. But I used to be a very, very, very angry person, and I was really ashamed of my anger, really ashamed of my anger, and only the closest people at times. It's not like it was there. Well, it was there for a while, all the time, on like boiling underneath the surface. But I would get these flares of really anger turning into, and I'm going to admit to people, rage at times.
Mm.
Oh gosh.
And and so I thought, when we imagine shadow work, we imagine like this kind of demon, almost like scary. And you see drawings of people advertising shadow work, and they put it like this smaller person and this big kind of shadowy demon almost over them.
Mm.
But my shadows have actually shown me the opposite of that. That's what they seem like to you in the moment. Does that make sense? But when you actually really ask, who
Mm.
are you? And I look at it as like a character, if that makes sense. And so say, who are you? And that anger, all of a sudden, I was expecting it to be like a red devil, and it was a little boy about 8 or 10 that was really pissed off at the world. And that's how my anger showed
Mhm.
itself to me, and I understood it. And it was like I
Mm.
wasn't heard. That's where my anger came from. I felt I wasn't heard. I felt I wasn't acknowledged when I was younger. I felt like the only way to be heard was to really show that I'm angry and that people will get it then.
Oh, I see.
Mm.
Yeah.
Does that
Mm.
make sense? And
Mm.
that's what shadow work was and is. And I took that little boy and I said, thank you for showing me that. Thank you. You know what?
Hmm.
I love you. And I understand where that comes from. So if I'm feeling that anger, I now know where that was coming from. I'm not being heard. I feel I'm
Mm.
not being, that little child in me, or that little, that part of me feels like it's not being heard. And so if other people aren't going to hear it, I'm going to hear it, and I'm going to take care of it. And it's also about personal responsibility, shadow
Mm.
work. So you don't put it out on other people, and other people can help you with it. Definitely, but what it comes down to is the responsibility. Okay, that's showing up in me. I'm feeling it. I used to have really bad anxiety. This is another shadow that showed itself to me. Really like crippling, a few times, almost to the point of going into hospital anxiety. Really bad, bad anxiety. And when I was in a good place in my anxiety, it showed its head a couple of times, but I hadn't really felt it for a long time. And I asked, "Who are you?" again. And she showed herself as a bag lady,
Oh, okay.
and worried about not getting what she needs, people rejecting her, people looking at her and judging her. And she named herself. No offense to anyone named Maddie out there, but she called herself Maddie to me in my mind's eye. And I
Mm.
loved her, and I held her, and I thanked her because she's showing me many, many things. Anxiety, the opposite of anxiety is peace. So I know what peace
Mm.
feels like in my body. Does that make sense? So she's
Hmm.
a
Mm.
gift. She's a gift to me. And so when she comes up, and she doesn't come up very often, but when she niggles here or there, I can see her in my mind's eye. I know where she comes from. I know what she wants. She wants to be loved, and she wants to be told that she's seen and heard. And so I do.
Mm.
And she just slips back to being quiet again. and being there. Slips back into peace. So that to me is shadow
Mm,
work. I don't know what you guys think, but that's what shadow work is. And it's been life changing for me, really life
mm,
changing. And it's beautiful to me.
mm,
Facing the scary sides to me is a joy now. When it
Mm.
used to not be.
It's
I
good,
used
isn't
to
it,
not
when you
take
can.
personal responsibility. I used to not. I used to not love being the victim. I hated being the victim, but I sat in the victim role for many, many years, which did me
Yeah, it
no
is
good.
powerful when you can. It's really powerful when you can own it and think, okay, this happened, this took place. I don't want to be a prisoner to this. I am going to take the steps to sort of move out of this. And you see this a lot with them. We were talking earlier about sort of in readings with what we do, and like we know a spread of cards might be shown, and some people I think have this misconception that like a tarot is going to save their life. It's just going to bring forward and highlight the work that needs to take place and to happen, but there's no quick fix with shadow work, whether you're using tarot or mediumship or whatever. Like, you have to own it. So with what you're saying, Lucy, about like you've got to own that for what it is. When you were saying about the character of Maddie, they, you know, like in Labyrinth where there's the lady with all the stuff on her back, that's what I was being shown. I don't know
Oh,
why,
interesting.
but
Oh,
like,
interesting.
yeah, they were really showing me, and I suppose, and she does carry all of her crap around, doesn't she? And she tries to palm it off on other people, like in that film of Labyrinth. Towards the end, she's trying to keep, I can't remember what the woman's name is, the girl, but she,
Sarah.
that's the one, Sarah. She's trying to keep her imprisoned in her own crap, isn't she? By bulking her up with her own kind of stuff, you know. And then
Mm,
she breaks free, and she's like, "No, I don't want that. I want to be free." Like you say, I want to have that peace. Um, so yeah, that's what was being shown as you were talking
mm,
that story to me,
mm,
Lucy.
mm.
That's
That's a
amazing.
really lovely way. Yeah, it's a really the way you're doing the shadow work, Lucy, with um asking and then getting that mind's eye vision, and then your the way that your conscious and your brain puts it together is with a character that you can relate to, which I think is really really a really lovely way of doing it. That's actually a really, because it actually then takes away that scary demon thing, which a lot of people don't know where to start with shadow work. And everybody, again, it's like we say all the way along, it's everybody does it differently.
Yeah,
Everybody clicks with things differently. But I think us three coming together and saying how we do it, it shows that it can be done anyway, like that, works with you. And I actually really love the idea of seeing that piece of shadow work, asking, um, who is it? And then it becoming a form that you can then actually go, oh, okay, you're not as scary as I thought you were. Come here, I'm going to give you a hug. I'm going to dissolve you into me. And then every time that anxiety comes back up, you've got that um, person to then say, no, you need a hug. Like we would do in normal life. If somebody stood in front of you and was upset, you'd go and give them a hug, wouldn't you? Well, some people don't hug, but some people do. You'd hold their hand and go, well,
you'd show
come
that
on
love in
then.
some way, wouldn't you? Yeah,
Yeah, you'd immerse them in love, or you'd sit and listen, or you'd say, come on, let's go and have a cup of tea, tell me all about it. Let's, offload your shit on me type thing. And I think that's a really, really beautiful way. When you were talking, I was like, that is so, so lovely, because that resonate with people different. You see, when I do the shadow work, I write a lot of stuff down.
Journaling's a good
So
way. Yep.
yep, yeah. So I'll sit there and I'll write a lot of stuff down. If something comes up, I'll be aware of an emotion. And if I can't remember, like you, I don't deal with it there and then, because sometimes you can't. Sometimes, like you say, you're not in the right frame of mind, which is
mm.
absolutely right. Because you've still got, when you're working, you've still got to, even if you're doing shadow work, you've got to be coming from a really good place, because otherwise it's not going to be dealt with good strength. You're not that you're going to go into it half-heartedly. You're not going to go into it with a good frame of mind. And you need to have that strong love, love and light situation going on, So yeah, absolutely. You have to, but make a note of it. Come back to it if you need to come back to it. The way I do it is I write things down. I imagine I do certain things. So I'll write things down on pieces of paper and I'll burn them, which is, slightly ritual spell work, but that's the way I work. Um, I've made little boats. You get biodegradable, little paper boats,
Oh yeah.
and then write it on a piece of paper. And depending on what's going on, I put it off and it will go down the river. Don't tell everybody, but it's a bit of littering, but you know what I mean. I'll see in my mind's eye the onion layers, or imagine it being peeled off. And as I'm imagining that layer going, or that pass the parcel, I find is really a really good one as well. If you imagine pass the parcel. Mm. But as it's happening, I won't just sit there and go, oh yeah, pass the parcel. I've got a bag of Haribo. How exciting. Along with that goes acknowledging the emotion, realizing it doesn't fit with what I'm doing now. Say, okay, I know my triggers of that. I'll be aware of that. It no longer serves me. And then I'll imagine it like disappearing like that, like fireflies. So I do things physically as well as, in the mind's eye as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing, isn't it, how we all do things completely different. Also do shoelaces. If you feel like there's an attachment, you can cut the shoelace. So the way I see it, everybody's a little bit different, but strawberry shoelaces that used to buy your penny sweets, they were like 2p each, weren't they? That's what I imagine cords are. So if I can feel there's an emotional attachment to an emotion or a feeling or stuff, it's like an umbilical cord, and it's not going to happen on the first cut, but I'll see a big pair of scissors and they'll come along and cut them, and then I'll let them go. But it will take a process, because you can guarantee that it then becomes, it will then attach, and it's like, no, I don't serve you, I'm letting you go. But that takes some time. It's not gonna, you'll notice a slight light. I tend to notice a slight lighten up on the first one, but it does take a process, and continually, and letting that cord get longer and longer, and snipping it, and that getting further and further away, depending on how heavy an emotion, a trigger, a shadow work is.
Well, with trauma or anything that happens, one thing we need to acknowledge is that we don't always feel just one emotion. It's a myriad of emotions, and that can get very complex. Does that make sense? And it can get very confusing, and it can also get very shameful, because sometimes when we have something happen that's quite traumatic, let's say, I'm going to bring it up, and I'm just going to be honest, because this is quite shameful for a lot of people, is sexual abuse or rape. The body may have betrayed them in some way, and that they actually felt a little bit turned on, or there was an orgasm that happened, but yet their psyche and their body and their spirit has been totally taken advantage of and infringed on, and they know that. So there's this confusion. Does that make sense? It can go on, and spirit is so good at doing the layering and getting down to getting rid of the confusion. And I just want to put that out for listeners and stuff like that. It took me years to get through confusion of different traumas that have happened to me. Confusion of how I felt. Sometimes the trauma comes from someone that you love deeply. So there's that confusion of the love and hate, and when you can have both, and you can accept both are there, and spirit will acknowledge that both are there. You don't have to pick one or the other. Does that make sense? Both can be there.
That's really good to talk about, isn't it? Because when I do readings, and if some of this subject matter comes out, that's a common theme of, like, you see the person almost held a love for the abuser, even though what happened to them was awful, and they're confused. They don't get, how can I love this person, yet they did this vile stuff to me. So I think that's really good with you saying that, Lucy.
Yeah, it's Mitch, I'm interested. What's your personal journey? Do you have a personal journey with shadow work? Do you call it something different, or do you have a ritual that you do inside of yourself?
I call it letting the shit go. Like, so when I do
shedding the
work,
shit. Shedding the shit.
Shedding the shit. Yeah, I do it completely different to you guys. I will do a mix of things depending on what is coming up, how I'm being triggered, and it does depend. So one of the things I do a lot is just kind of going into the energy, sitting in the power, not necessarily at the time, but at some point I will go into not even a guided meditation, but I will just go into my own thoughts and I will go back into my mind. And it's a bit like a movie reel. And I will be like, okay, spirit, show me what the situation is and what are we really looking at here. And I'll see it as like a movie reel. And I often will relive the pain, those energies, those feelings will come back up. And then a bit like you said, Lucy, it's like questioning and asking, where is this really coming from? What is this experience really trying to show me? What's the lesson? Because I always feel with shadow work there's a lesson or there's a teaching. And so when we find that, sometimes I might not like what I see and I might have to sit with that for a while and be like, yeah, I'm not ready to acknowledge you today, I'll come back to that another day. Or sometimes I can accept, okay, let's go with that. And then I like, a bit like you were saying, Lucy, about I send love. I just send these balls of unconditional love and light back, and proper love and light, not love and light, but proper love and light back to that former version of that hurt version of me. And it might be as a kid, it might be in my teenage years, it varies depending on where it's come from. And just knowing that this is a piece of your story, it's not everything about your journey, you know, it doesn't define you. It's a moment, it's a piece, and there's life beyond this. Another way that I sometimes do shadow work, a bit like when Whirlwind was saying about like the boats going down. I don't use a boat. I'll either, if I'm in the woods, very often you'll see little streams or rivers, and I will just maybe get like a log or a piece of something, and like I'll hold the intentions in my hand that I want to get rid of, and I will just feel my body sort of transferring that energy, and then I'll throw it into the river or the stream or whatever I've got available at the time. And it's nature's way of taking that and sort of transferring that into something new, you know. And sometimes burying's a good one to do. So sometimes I might just write something down on a piece of paper and physically bury it into the earth, and so that the, you know, the earth, the soil can take it and it can be transformed into something brand new. It's that little seed that goes into that darkness and it can be, you know, reset almost. So that tends to be how I do it. Or if I'm really angry, I mean, you said a lot about anger, and it's something that I don't experience too often. I actually don't get too angry, and I think that's because I've got 3 earth in my star sign chart. So because I know when Lucy first met me, she thought I was high as a kite. She's like, I thought you were smoking something. Remember you said that to me? Like, I
Me and
thought,
Colin
I
said,
thought you were.
does he use marijuana? Because you were so chilled. Your eyes were like little slits, and you're like, hey, how you doing? And he gave me a little hug, and I'm like, and I went away, and Colin's like, do you think he smokes dope? And I'm like, maybe. Some people do part of their meditation. Like I have zero problem with actually, I'm sorry, I'm going off, but I just want to put that out there. I believe that kind of stuff has medicinal purposes that can be very used in your spiritual walk at certain times that
Yeah.
can actually really be a beautiful thing. So I'm not making fun of anybody that likes the marijuana, but no, I did think, is that part of his like thing? Maybe he meditates and smokes a doob before he gets out there and reads. He doesn't, but maybe
No,
he
I
does.
don't. No, I don't. It's just literally, I am just quite a chilled, grounded, earthy person as a rule. But there are moments when I get angry, you know, very briefly. It's not something I experience that much. But when I do, if I'm really angry, then it's a sort of smashing a glass across the room job. So I'll get like a jam jar and I might write, either might write on it or I might put a piece of paper inside, whatever the issue is. And I take great pleasure on those rare occasions of like going into the garden and make sure Oski's not around, and I will smash the fucker across the room, and I have no problem doing it.
You
You
know
know,
what? I agree with that. Like the foam baseball bats that people say, pillows, that all that kind of thing. Somatically, that gets that anger out in a safe way. You
yeah,
know, and I see no shame in that because anger is part of the human experience. And a lot
Mm,
of us shut down. And yes, people's anger can turn vicious and horrible if not dealt with.
mm,
So if you
mm,
have anger and there is no shame in anger. Some anger is
mm,
righteous anger. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's getting it out into the right outlet that it can somatically and energetically leave you and be done in a safe, and also sometimes it can be done in a productive way. So people will um, maybe go out and boycott something. Does that make sense? In their anger towards that, and they feel that that is good for them. I have no problem, like in safe, peaceful boycotting. I have zero problem with that. If that to me is taking anger and using it righteously for something that you believe in. If that,
mm.
yeah. So
yeah.
That's awesome
Mm.
that you say that because
And
yeah,
my,
I it's amazing how we all do it so differently. And for me, part of, sorry, I'm just going to put that out there for people that are dealing with some really heavy issues. Shadow work, counseling is a part of shadow work. So I regularly went to a counselor for once a week for years, and now I go about once a month to once every 6 weeks. And I've had the same counselor for years. I love her dearly, but I leave all my crap with her and she knows how to deal with it. Does that make sense? Deal with it. And that
mm,
she's been a big journey, part of my journey in the shadow work. So if you have stuff that's very complex, people out there, do not be ashamed to go to a counselor. Okay, because counselors and their counselors have counselors and it is um it is supporting each other and they're professionally trained to deal with very complex emotions that might be a little bit at the
mm,
beginning hard to rummage through on your own.
And I think
Just
that's really
very
good you're saying that as well, because there are times when I think people use tarot readers as counselors, but we're not
mm,
trained in that area, you know. So there are times when stuff is presented to us and it's out of our control, and we have to say, okay, this is going into a space that as a reader, I am now not comfortable with dealing with. You need the counseling or you need the professional help. And I've had that quite a lot recently where something's just got too heavy or it's got too dark and I'm like, I can no longer offer you this as the service of what is available from me. You need something more than I can give. And I think as readers, anyone that is, you know, reading or whatever, it's okay to be that person to say no. Part of obviously the shadow work is handing back responsibility. And you know, like Lucy says, there are people that are trained to go deeper with that, and tarot readers are not those people.
mm, mm. And sometimes you need somebody professionally to help unpick, those bits and pieces as well. And like you say, the counselors will go through and start helping you unravel, but a lot of the responsibility you've got to have on yourself, haven't you, to be able to go back and work on it as well.
I used to look at it
Definitely,
as a
it's like
really shitty thing. Yeah, going through it. Sorry, Mitch, go
yeah.
for it.
No, no, I was just going to say, like we talked earlier about, like, you know, I had a client this morning, and there was a lot of emphasis on certain pieces of the client's reading, and the cards were really good, and they were showing her all this great way of life that was available, but she was adamant, no, I don't see that. I don't sort of think that's going to come good. I don't think that's going to happen. And she's already made that decision in her mind. She doesn't want to do the shadow work to then get to this greater part of her story. She's in that sense of avoidance almost, which is a shame when you see someone's potential. But if they're not going to own it, we can't have the light without dark. Stars can't shine without darkness. There has to be that combination
Exactly.
of both.
Mm, mm,
And that's
That's what
what
I was
shadow
going to
work
say. Carry
is
on.
like, that's wonderful. That's what shadow work is that amalgamating, that integrating the darkness and the light, accepting the
mm,
darkness in us and loving the darkness in us. And
mm,
like some parts of shadow work are hard to look at. Yeah, it might be that you look at your victim and you've been sitting in victim, but they can be out of that victim mentality. There can be other shadows that are there that are not so pretty. For instance, a lot of people, not all people, but a lot of people that have been victims to stuff can become manipulators
Mm.
because they've never
mm,
maybe learned how to get something by just asking or, and they felt like
mm,
um, they need to, they've turned to manipulating situations to get what they need. Do you know what I'm saying? That's not a
mm.
pretty one
I,
to look at because that's you. That's something in you that you've been doing that has affected other people in not a good way. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So in a way,
mm,
that your abuse can turn that you can be the abuser, and it's admitting to that, breaking that cycle, looking at things like that deeply. That's just one aspect I'm saying about the manipulation, and it but at the same time, it's all about freeing. It's not about humiliation. It's not about necessarily being this like grandiose, better person or to become like work to be. I don't know how to put it, but it's about freeing and loving yourself. That's what shadow work is. And we touched on forgiveness. I just want to go into forgiveness a little bit. You said some people might be like, oh, I'm not ready to forgive. I think we as a society are learning what forgiveness is, but we still hold on to the old view of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not saying what that person did was okay.
Mm.
Forgiveness is saying,
Mm.
I release the pain that
Mm.
that person caused inside of me, and I'm not holding on to that pain anymore in whatever way it looks like in me and
Mm.
whatever way it acts out in me. That's what forgiveness is.
That's really
Mm.
good. Like I
Mm.
spoke to Lucy a couple of weeks ago, I think it was now, about this, and like because I had an experience, or I had something that had gone down in my family for a while, and I was holding this frustration, this lack of forgiveness for quite a few years, and then I did a meditation, and spirit were like, "You need to sort this little gremlin out. You need to let this kind of go." And exactly as Lucy's like sort of said, I had this epiphany of this moment where I had to just contact this family member that I had chose not to speak to for about 3 or 4 years, because I felt I couldn't forgive the situation of what had happened. And I just messaged this person and I said, look, can we find a way to move past this? Can we find a way to rebuild? Because time has passed, things have happened, and as Lucy just said, the situation, the pain, I can never forgive the experience, but I don't allow it to trigger. And this family member was like, yeah, I would like that. I would like us to try and get back to some sort of level of normality. And that was huge for me. And that had impacted indirectly the whole family for a long time. Because when there were like family gatherings or events where everyone was together, I couldn't be in the same room as that person. And now it's just like, let's just let it be. And interestingly, I didn't get time to talk to them because I was busy, but they actually came to the recent witches market in Westbury, and I noted that they made a point of turning up there. So, and I was like, okay, that's a big step, because they would have avoided coming to anything that I was doing of that nature before. Whereas prior to all of it going wrong, they would have been supportive. They would have done that, and it's a slow process, but there's rebuilding, and that's what it's about, isn't it? Being able to rebuild and think. And also,
Mm.
we're all human, and it's like we've said before, we're all human, and each day is a new experience, and we're living that day for the first time, so we don't always get it right. We act sometimes in those moments of what we think is good, and then we realize later on down the road maybe that wasn't the best way to take it. But in that moment, for right or wrong reasons, people acted the way that they felt was right to act.
Mm.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't think
And
anything's
that's all
big enough,
about.
too big for spirit to heal. Go ahead, Carly. I just wanted to put
Mm.
that in
I was
there.
going to say that's yeah, absolutely, and that's all about also being honest and taking responsibility. Again, another tiny part of shadow work, taking responsibility for your actions and owning up to them at a later date, like you have done, Mitch. You've
Mm.
said, okay, I made a boo boo. I hold my hands up. It's gone too long now. Let's build a bridge. And that is, taking responsibility for your actions. So shadow work isn't just letting the bad shit that happens to you go. It's also admitting that you have done some, not really bad shit, but you've done some really silly things, or you've
We all
done a
have,
silly
yeah.
thing and go, you know, I've made a cock up, really sorry, but let's move past this. So it's also about accepting accepting that us as humans do bad things as to other people, or not very nice things to other people, as other people were possibly done to us. So it's a two-way street, isn't it? It's that whole thing about balance. It's that whole two-way street. And like you say, we've
Definitely.
said before, honesty. Yeah, sorry, Mitch, go on, you can say.
Oh no, I was just going to say. I mean, in my situation, a person. Oh, excuse the dog if you can hear him going off. Like, in my situation, it was very much a case of like, that person acted in the moment of what they felt was best to do. I took offense to it, and it all it blew up for a long time out of proportion. But that person acted in what they felt was the best way to handle the situation. I didn't agree, so it almost was a bit of a clash of egos in a way as well.
Mm.
And it took spirit to say, Mitch, you've got to let this go now, because you're actually holding this in a way in a place of ego, and it almost wasn't even about the situation. It had gone into something completely different, and spirit were like, just free yourself from it, because it was causing so much pain within me, not even about the other person. It was just hurting me so much.
Yeah, like I had an experience. I've had quite a few experiences with spirit when it comes to forgiveness and stuff like that, and letting pain go. For years, I was very angry. My dad, I think, watches these because he likes all the videos. But I was very angry at my father. I felt like he could have been better. I felt like he could have made better decisions. I felt like, oh, I'm going to get a bit misty-eyed here, but um, I felt like he rejected me and he rejected our family because he moved away and moved to the my parents got divorced. He moved to the Philippines and married a woman and has a whole other family in the Philippines now. And this is how wild spirit can be. I was walking to the fridge to get the milk for my tea or coffee. I opened the fridge up and as clear as day, it came, it said, and with emotion, he loved you the best that he could. And I knew who they were talking about.
Oh,
He
wow.
loved you the best that he could. And like my dad's life was not an easy life. My dad's childhood was not an easy childhood at all. And does that negate what he's done and how I feel in situations? Not at all, but it brings an understanding. It brings a more grace to the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That my dad's trauma, my dad's shadows infiltrated my childhood. And so the buck stops here. My shadows, I don't want them to infiltrate my daughter's life. But if they do, she'll be the continuation. Or if there's little niggly ones that I've been blinded to, do you know what I'm saying? Or have seeped through, she hopefully will continue the work to break the generational, because there is generational shadows, if that makes sense. And we've dabbed and dabbed on that mental health, suicide, that kind of stuff. That can be generational, where you see it in families generationally. Alcoholism, drug addiction, you can see it. Poverty. There's so many different ones where you can see generationally it goes down the family timeline. We all, as people, have generational shadows. And so it's also our responsibility not to blame. You can blame for a while. I think blaming for a while is part of the acknowledgement. It's when you get stuck in the blame that it can turn bad. Does that make sense? And there are people that get stuck in blame, and then that's that victim mentality where you don't take any responsibility. And that's the shitty part of shadow work. Is It's not shitty once you get it into it, but it's that acknowledgement of, okay, this is now on my plate. I can throw my verbal diarrhea to everyone and blame everyone around me. But no, the only way this is going to get fixed, and for me, that took many, many tower moments in my life. When I say the tower moments, the tower card in the tarot shaking up, where I'm left there going, you know what? I'm the only one left standing here. And this is all on, not all on me in the sense of blame, but I've got to take responsibility. And if that makes me that I have to take responsibility for the generational stuff so that I can live in freedom and my daughter can live in freedom, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And to me, that's real.
And that's the
I'm
key.
going to pat myself on the back. That's real strength. And I don't normally pat myself on the back, but anyone that's willing to stand up and do the generational stuff, because shadow work is part of it, is because you're breaking, you're changing the generations in front of you for the good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's taking that stand and having your eyes open on your spiritual journey to realizing that that's a generational thing, and then I always call it turning over a new leaf. So and you see it. I'll take my ex-partner as I very much doubt he watches this. But take my ex-partner as an example. Now, his dad left left the family when he was 16, and very much like the publican life, go down the pub, things like that. And he used that. I look at him now, and he used that a lot of the time in our relationship as an excuse to why our relationship was the way it was. But he was repeating his mother and father's relationship, with me and him. You see, I didn't like standing for that because obviously I've been brought up by my mum and dad, which is my first experiences of relationships. And I'm quite lucky. I mean, my parents parted when I was 16, but up to I was, 14, they were they were pretty solid, you know. So my first experience is their relationship. So that was my, well, this is how it should be. Family should come first. Da, 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 the kids come first, that type of thing. Whereas my ex-partner's relationship was completely different. You know, his first experience of relationship was completely different. And I kept saying to him, you can change this. You can stop the regurgitation of the same thing. You can turn over a new leaf. His brothers, so my brother-in-laws, changed it. And you can see that their family is important. They didn't live life in the pub. You know, their kids are important. And I made sure that my son didn't carry on the experience from his dad. And my son is nowhere near like my ex-partner. He is 200% better. His boys are his world, you know? But you can see it. I could see it 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I could see it. And that was one of the major arguments that we always had, was change it. You've got to change it. But the thing is, with him as a person, obviously I'm a different person to him, but he was actually lacking. I look at him now and he was actually lacking in a lot of self-confidence and lacking in a lot of self-belief. And he went to the pub and did things because he wanted to fit in. And he felt that he was fitting in and being one of the lads. But he couldn't see that his family was more important. His, me and the children were more important than the boys down the pub. You know, we were always going to be there, and the blokes down the pub weren't. And he couldn't understand that. But it's, I've seen it, and I know exactly what you mean. You know, having that strength and having that mindset and that light bulb moment to go, this isn't carrying on. This has got to stop. And that takes a lot of strength and a lot of doing. So to you, Lucy, for enabling to do that, because then you've because you've then set that for me.
Freedom is so much better than living with the shit. I just came to a point in my life where I was so tired of being tired of me. And I saw patterns, if that makes sense. So something happens once, okay. But I saw pattern after pattern where I had to look and go, okay, there's a part of me that's responsible for this too. I'm living out the victim mentality, and I've got to stop, look at that and dig deep, because especially after I had my daughter, I was like, nope, I don't want to inflict any of me unhealed. And I'm sure there is moments where things come out. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm human, but I didn't want to inflict my crap on her growing up. I wanted her to come out.
Really lovely. I think that's really lovely that you can hold that and say, enough. I'm not prepared to sort of let that replay into another cycle, another generation, because you see it so often where people do, and it's a little bit ucky, isn't it? It's not very nice. So the fact that you've almost said, actually, no, I want to give my daughter a better quality of life, not just physically, but energetically as well.
Mm-hmm. Because energetically turns into physically. That's how I believe things. You can change your surroundings, and I've done that. I've lived in many places. I'm a darter. As soon as things got tough, I ran, didn't stay. Does that make sense? And I realized I'm dragging, okay, and then I would get into a new surrounding and it would be, oh, this is different for a while, and then the same shit would come up and I'd be doing the same patterns, and I'm like, and then I'd run again and start afresh, start a new life, and then the same, and I think, no, something's going, this is me. And it made me feel sick to my stomach. But then when I finally was able to put love on it and go, okay, it's all right. You're still lovable. You are loved. Even that person back then that was living a chaotic mindset and a chaotic life, I love her because she didn't know any better. And the patterns I'm grateful for, because the pattern showed me. And the opposite of being locked in bondage is freedom. So to me, like, it's the yin and the yang. I had this for the longest time and it's gross, but now I'm in this. And the more and more shackles are coming off of me. I love it. I love my life.
Mm.
I
Oh,
love
that's
where I
really good.
came from to where I am. And that's part
Yeah.
of shadow
Mm.
work, is saying,
Mm.
I love where I came from to where I am. I'm not
Mm.
ashamed of
Mm.
any of it
Mm.
because
And
And
I
also,
didn't
sometimes
know.
when you
well,
Go for
go
it.
on,
oh,
Mitch, you
Yeah.
go.
oh, I was just going to say, like, and also that then takes you into that vibration of like living in gratitude almost, doesn't it? You know, so like not needing to have the most of everything or the best of everything, but just being grateful for what your world becomes or is. You know, there's that
Mm.
deeper awareness of like life is a work in progress, but it's also bloody cool. It's really good. Definitely. Sorry, carry on.
Mm. No, do you know what? That's exactly what I was going to say. I was just
Ah,
about to say you've got to remember even the tiniest little bit of, shadow work or the unpicking. You've got to look back on that to see how far you've come. To give yourself, don't be, again, we're talking about, being ashamed and things like, don't be ashamed to give yourself, like you've done, Lucy, a pat on the back. Don't be ashamed to someone stay there and go, bloody hell, look how far I've come. Look what I've got through. Look what I've unpicked. Look what I am now. I've turned over. I've stopped that progression of the same routine. I've stopped it in its tracks. I've created a new thing. I've created something different. I've created a new me. So never be, like you say, and give gratitude to that. Every tiny little thing, the roof over your head, the air that you breathe, the ground that you walk on. Just,
the dog
yeah,
that growls at you for no
absolutely.
reason.
The dog that growls at you.
Well, I was
but
just thinking in
but
my head, from last episode, which we're releasing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And I was going on about veganism. I don't know. My shadow work might take me that you know, turn into a vegan, turn into a vegetarian, turn into something I was never expecting. And that is part of shadow work, is the releasing of things. Does that make sense? And so
yeah.
for me, I'm learning to stand in my own power, and I'm only on that. And to me,
Mm.
that little bit is even just like from what I was before is just holy. But I'm excited to what Spirit has in store for me. And I don't like having bad or negative things happen or triggers happen. I don't like it. But I'm learning to accept it more and more, that the triggers are there to release. So when something triggers me, why is it triggering me? And then we go into the shadow work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then it's freedom. But the
Mm.
triggers don't feel very nice at the moment. But that is part of the journey, is facing and taking responsibility to what triggers you. And like Mitch for me is a huge friend, because people trigger me, and that is just part of being in this world. And I'll be like, and I get it out because that's my name, verbal diarrhea. I have to get it out of me. If it sits in me, it makes me ill. Does that make sense? I have to, that's just part of my
Yeah, yeah.
personality, is I'm not very good at sitting and internally doing stuff. That's why I go to a counselor, so I can get it out. And like Mitch, I'll be like about a situation. And then and then I said, "Are we gossiping?" And Mitch said, "No, we're not gossiping, because we're holding space for each other." And I know that whatever I say will not change Mitch's mind on what he feels about a situation, because he's strong enough inside of himself. And that's not my
Exactly.
Mm.
intention. My
Mm.
intention is to get it out of me, and then for us to look
Mm.
at it, and he gives perspective on it, because he might have a different angle from it. And then I go, why is this is triggering me because of jealousy in my life, or this in my, does that make sense? They remind me of someone, and then maybe I have to look at who that person is that they remind me of. And that's part of the journey. It's that
Mm.
clearing and that healing. And it's all right to actually be a
Mm.
trigger. We're
Mm.
always scared of being a trigger in someone else's life. But sometimes when you annoy people, that's for them actually to look at what's going on in their life. It's not that you're the problem if you're the annoyance. I don't say
Mm.
to annoy people on purpose,
Yeah,
but
it's
sometimes we
that
just
mirror
annoy.
effect, isn't it?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's all right for that person's
Mm.
healing. And you shouldn't be ashamed if someone is annoyed at you,
Mm.
because there's something going on in them, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. I
Mm.
must piss a few people off then, I wonder, because like a lot of people get annoyed by me. Or am I just holding up a big mirror quite a lot? Have it back,
I
have it back.
I think too, when we stand in our power and other people aren't there in their power yet, that can cause a lot of friction in that person. Does that make sense? And I know for me, if I saw people stand in confidence years ago, um, I'd almost feel like, do they have any right to stand in confidence? You know, that, and or it would come out in different ways in me, depending on the situation and where I was at in my life. But then I realized
Mm.
I had a problem with people that had confidence because I had no confidence. And it was
Yeah.
actually
Mm.
something that my soul was wanting for me, is to have their confidence.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Not their
Mm.
confidence, but you know what I
One
mean?
thing you
Have
was,
that confidence. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One thing you were saying actually was quite interesting, and I thought about as you were saying, Lucy, about when you're you hold something, and obviously your lovely name is verbal, your alias is verbal diarrhea. You need to get that out. I love that. It makes me chuckle every time. Um, but also we got to be aware that if you hold it in, like anxieties can cause, as we know, holding an energy in, holding attention in can affect the body. So doing the shadow work, bunny ears, whichever way you want to look at it, you're actually enabling your body to you're helping your body not to have adverse knock-on reactions like IBS, sickness, body aches, because you're unbalancing yourself. So doing your shadow work, letting it go, you're not causing, some people hold it around the solar plexus, which is obviously around your middle. So you end up with middle back pain. You end up with some people an IBS and guttural problems and, gallbladder issues. If you hold it in your shoulders, you're then going to have shoulder aches, neck pain. So it's all of this is really important to enable it to let go. So it's not just your emotional state, it's also that energy and that emotion has it in your physical state as well. I thought I'd bring that up.
No, I think that's
That's
awesome.
really
I'm
good.
gonna
Yeah.
let, yeah, can I just put something in there and then I'm gonna let you go, Mitch? Speak. I just
Go on.
wrote it down because it's, you know how I am, verbal diarrhea. It's got to come out of me. Um,
Go for it.
I have rheumatoid arthritis. I got diagnosed about 16 years ago with it. When I got diagnosed, I could barely walk. I thought I had cancer, so I was actually really glad when they said rheumatoid arthritis. They were like, "Oh, you have rheumatoid," and I was like, "Thank God." And they were like, "What?" But anyway, and that's been a journey in itself for me. Is okay, somatically, I've taken drugs and all that kind of stuff to try to get the rheumatoid under control, and it's been quite the journey. In 2021, during COVID, I don't know. Do you guys know who Dr. Gabor Mate is?
Oh yeah, I've heard
Yeah,
He's
the name. I know the
like the
name.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he's like
No,
the Freud. He's like the Freud and Carl, more like a Carl Jung of our generation, basically.
Okay.
Very, very famous psychologist, amazing, amazing psychologist, written many, many books. For £5, you could get on a Zoom call with him, and there was about 2,000 of us on this Zoom call, right? But I thought, oh, I
Oh
want to
wow.
be on a Zoom call and watch Dr. Gabor Mate talk. And then they said, if you put your questions in this in the chat box, the callers can vote on whose question gets answered. And so my question got voted as one of the top ones to get answered. And so I asked him, and it's on YouTube. I could put the link in below of me talking to Dr. Gabor Mate. Um, I asked him about his thoughts on rheumatoid arthritis and psychology. And he looked at me and he said, "Can I speak about you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You have a lot of pent up righteous anger or good anger that you were never allowed to express. Um, I'm assuming that you took the parenting role on many times in your life for your parents, that the roles were switched emotionally, that you had to emotionally be there for your parents, or you felt that you had to emotionally be there for your parents when you were a child." And he went on to about basically what rheumatoid arthritis is your body attacks its own immune system. And so they've discovered more and more that it's a lot of women that have it, but it's like 10% men and 90% women that get it. But it's a lot of um, trauma and self-hatred
Oh
and not
wow.
being able to speak out
mm,
anger. Does that make sense? When they're angry and all that kind of stuff that has caused the body to turn on itself. So you're completely correct there, Carly, that when we do hold
mm,
negative energy, and that's why I'm all about getting it out of me now, get it out, get it out, get it out, because it affects our health greatly.
mm,
greatly. So the
I'm not,
rheumatoid fibromyalgia is another one. There's a load of autoimmune diseases that they're connecting now. Yes, they are physical diseases, but they go along with the emotional and how you treat yourself emotionally. So that in itself is a gift to me because I've had to learn to treat myself too better emotionally and love
Yeah,
myself
definitely.
better.
Wow. That's what I was going to say with the healing that I do, or that other healers that I'm aware of do. You often see it like someone will come thinking they've got like a physical problem, and then when you start doing the energy work, you'll pick it out and you'll be like, well, this is physically happening, but it's actually because of something emotionally that you haven't sort of dealt with. I see that a lot in healing, and because I work with the violet flame, so there's 45 symbols, you can go quite deep, you can be quite thorough with stuff, we'll say. And it is interesting, and often people will come in having that awareness kind of shifted of like, I now need to do this inner work because it is affecting my physical body. And before they were just sort of putting it off, and it almost is that light bulb moment for people. So yeah, it's cool with what you guys are saying, because I see that a lot.
I mean, obviously, you've got to have a medical, sometimes you've got to have a medical
Oh,
diagnosis
100%.
so that
I have
you've got
medical
to, yeah,
doctors.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, us saying, okay, if you've got IBS, it means I'll hold it, please get a medical diagnosis with it. But maybe if you are suffering with IBS or if you have fibromyalgia, have a look at what else is going on so
Yeah.
that you can ease your symptoms and, help you like you have done, Lucy, and like you see Mitch. I mean, my daughter, bless her, she has become, she's done her own unpicking and things. She knows that she has anxiety. She's really aware of it. She's been seen a dietitian because she gets IBS. Hers, bless her, she knows is a catch-22. She gets a dicky belly, but it's normally because she's getting stressed about something. But then she gets into a situation where she's got a dicky belly but doesn't want to go out. So then she gets anxious about going out. But she's aware that it's happening, but also alongside going and seeing a dietitian, she's realized there's certain foods that kick it off. So she's aware that it's a bit of everything, a bit of anxiety, a bit of stress, and changing her diet, which fits her system. Because obviously, us as human beings, we're all made differently. And, we're all made to survive on probably a lot less processed foods than what we've got now. But it's really important. That's another rabbit hole for another day. But it's really important that you get a medical diagnosis and then have a look at the shadow work along with everything else that will help. It will help. Relieving the anxieties, being free will help your system immensely and take away that negative energy or that oppressive energy that you get. So yeah.
Absolutely. It's like I suffer with a lot of anxiety and still do periodically. And it's so weird because like I can get up in front on a stage in front of how many people, that does not bother me. But if you said to me, go to the post office with this letter, oh, that's a big one for me. I've got to proper psych myself up. And it's not about just getting up and doing it. There are days when I'm like, I don't think I can get to the post office today, or whatever. And another one for me used to be petrol. I used to hate having to put petrol in the pump in my car.
I understand that.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, those used to like really trigger me to the point where I would drive around and round and round, and like, and if a petrol garage was busy, I'm like, oh no, I'm not going in there. I need to find one that's card machine only. I'm not going in and having to sort of do a transaction with anybody. And I used to work in like retail for years, and you think, where is this stuff coming? And then when I unpicked it, it was through childhood trauma, not with my parents or anything, but from college, from school, and all the loads of abuse there. And it's that little boy feeling so vulnerable that they're going to be picked upon if they're setting out in the world, sort of thing.
If they don't do it right, if you pull into the petrol station and somebody's watching and you don't put the pump in the car, it's something as tiny and as simple as that. Having the
Yeah,
anxiety of going into the petrol station and not doing it right, and somebody seeing you and laughing at you or taking the mick. That's the trigger, isn't it? That's the anxiety bit that's kicking in. Yeah. So it's
That's
all,
amazing
it's
because
all there.
I'm the same as you, Mitch. I can get up like doing these podcasts. I get excited by this. Does that make sense? I
yeah,
get excited. I can get up and on a stage and talk in front of loads of people. It doesn't phase it. If there's anxious nerves of good high energy that go on that can feel like anxiety, but for some reason it
Yeah.
turns into more of a gets me on fire kind of thing. But calling a government agency on the phone, dealing with banking, like even for me to look at it's stupid. I'm training myself to get over that, but like to look at banking stuff, like Colin deals with most of our money because I have a real thing. It makes me feel I don't know, like there's all these fears that run through me of looking at banking.
Mm.
Yeah, I it's weird how it's weird how we are, isn't it? It like yeah, for
Mm.
me,
Mm.
talking in front of a lot of people, at least one person's going to like me out of that crowd. But going into a situation where there's like only a few eyes on me, I feel like it could turn like that. You saying about the doctors, right? My childhood, I was like, I hurt my neck, and I'll get into that story some other time. But my childhood was nothing but doctors, okay? And I had no voice at all. And that's part of where
Mm.
my anxiety comes from, is that not having a voice, not being able to stand in my own power. So doing shadow work, and now with rheumatoid arthritis and other issues I have with my body, diabetes, stuff like that, doctors are a regular part of my life still, and um, doing the shadow work, standing in my own power, and things have changed in the doctor's world. They're more listening to the patient and all that kind of stuff. But there has been times where I've had some pretty shitty doctors, and I've had to stand in my own power and really stand up for myself in a hard way and stand up for my
Mm.
health.
Mm.
And that by
Mm.
doing that shadow work has empowered me. Does that make sense in those times? And maybe that spirit bringing that along or allowing that to happen to show me you've come a long way, because I would have buckled
Yeah.
Mm.
before. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm.
I mean, I've had to write letters and deal with others higher than them to get the treatment that I know is, and then they've said, okay, we'll retest you. And I was right. My body was telling me, yeah, this is wrong. And they were trying to go the cheaper route, and stuff like that can happen. But doing the shadow work empowered me to stand up to them. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have buckled and probably been in a really bad spot physically,
Mm.
not getting on the right medication for what I have, because I wouldn't
Mm.
have
Mm.
voiced my opinion. I wouldn't have voiced that what
Mm.
they were saying was crap.
Mm. Mm. So
Yeah.
if just a thinking thought pattern, if we've got somebody listening to our wonderful podcast, have literally just walked in, what would your help, as I say, advice, help, guidance, how would you say to somebody who would like to start doing that, where to start doing that? Because there's one thing that obviously having the stall, I mean, we talk about it quite a lot, but sometimes, as we all know, we sort of, I don't know, I've just sort of fallen into it and gone, oh, this is how I feel I should be doing it. But a lot of people like guidance and like thought patterns. So where would you guys, what would you say to somebody who'd like to start and where to start and what they should do? What, advice? I sound very radiofied, don't I?
You do.
Sorry.
Just to let you know, we're coming up to the witching hour. I would say
Oh, crikey.
don't fear the shadows, and it is more a case of find a starting point and then unpick it, slowly. Think of the onion, the layers, go from there. Don't try and heal everything in one hit, because that's not
Mm.
going to happen. You've got to pick what's the most triggering thing, or what's the area that's bringing the most discomfort, and I say tackle that first, personally.
For me, I agree
Mm.
with Mitch, and the underlying and surrounding energy that I would love the people to practice without even doing shadow work is learning to love yourself very unconditionally, so unconditionally, and learning the power of
Mm.
love inside yourself and
Mm.
practicing it. Not just having a fleeting moment of it, but practicing it and practice sitting in it. And then the shadow work isn't scary at all.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And also, as you've said that, Lucy, communication is what Spirit have just said to me. The way we choose to communicate with ourselves, and you guys probably see this in your own readings, but some people, they talk down to themselves in such a
Mm.
disrespectful way. And I think communication, the way we choose to speak to ourselves, is massive. And that goes into self-love, self-care, respect, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people are so abusive to themselves, and it's like, where's that coming from?
I found a great way. I think the first time I did a bit of shadow work is when I put on my big girl pants and I chucked my ex out and really stood by it. You know, we'd split up quite a few times and chucked him out, and he'd wooed me and gone, "Oh, but I love you," and I'd let him back
Been
again.
there, yeah.
Stupid. Yeah.
What?
And I think the first time I really started doing it is when I really put my big girl pants on. And do you know the way I did it? And I think this might be a help for somebody, is the windows. They say about your eyes being the windows to your soul, and that is absolutely spot on. I actually looked at a mirror and I really looked at myself in my own eyes. And I cried, and oh, this gets me going again. I cried, I smiled, but it took time. You know, I didn't do enough. I did a bit and then come away and did it again. But every time I looked at the mirror, I looked at myself through my eyes and said, I'm worth more. I am lovely. I am strong. You know, and you really, and you have to feel it in your gut. Don't just do what I call sweeping it under the carpet. You know, oh yeah, I'm all right. We will do it. I'm all right. And basically, what
Love
you
and
do,
light.
you're
Love
not
and light.
feeling it. Love and light, love and light. Yeah, you're not feeling it. You know, it's not. You're not feeling it in yourself.
You've got to really
So
give yourself permission, haven't you, to receive it, essentially.
yeah. And a good way of doing that is looking just your face. You know, just your face in a mirror, and just really look at yourself and go, I am in there. I am still in there. I am wonderful, and I'm not taking this shit anymore. I'm not dealing with this crap anymore. And it was the best way I dealt with it. So if that helps anyone else, that'd be amazing.
Oh, that's cool. That's a nice place to round off, isn't it? I think.
I think so. Wow, what an awesome episode, you guys.
Thanks for coming.
Fabulous as always.
Well, I'm going to say bye for now. Love and light. Namaste.
See you soon, guys. Thanks for listening or watching.